Hello, welcome to Caledonia Senior Living and Memory Care, home of the Chicago Scots. For 175 years, our Scottish society has delivered life's most important things: home, family, and love. You'll find these simple and yet very powerful things at the heart of this unique community. This is what has sustained us through the toughest of times. And I know this is what will bring us together once again. Whether it's in a ballroom or a pub, on the golf course or on the field of our Highland Games, I can't wait to see you in person very soon. As Robert Burns would say, it's coming yet. Please stay tuned for an important announcement at the end of today's show. Well, it's the third weekend in June. We're in Chicago, and therefore it must be Highland Games weekend. Yes, the world is unlocking and reopening and emerging from our pandemic pause. But I'm afraid this didn't happen in time for us to organise our annual Scottish Festival and Highland Games as we had hoped. You know, it takes 6 to 12 months to organise our festivals, so we just didn't have the time. It wasn't possible, nor was it viable for us to pull together an event that would deliver the quality that you've come to expect. But we wanted to do something. Last year we hosted a virtual Highland Games, taking the opportunity to meet some of the colourful personalities and to tell the little-known stories behind the games. This year, we'll do something a little different. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to look at the three of the main elements of any Scottish Festival and Highland Games: bagpiping and drumming, athletics, and Highland dancing. To do this, we've gathered some experts and leaders to talk about the past, the present, and the future in each of these three fields. We suggested a theme for their discussions. We are the inheritors of the past, the stewards of the present, and the custodians of the future. Well, we captured some incredible, funny, fascinating, and very moving conversations, and each one was about an hour long. And we'll post these online in the days to come. But for today, we've edited each one of those conversations down to about 10 minutes. So let's start with bagpiping and drumming. As head of the Midwest Pipe Band Association, Jim Sim organised and grew the piping championship at our games into the largest in the United States. Jim hosted a conversation with leaders of two of the pipe band community's most important organisations. Kevin Reilly, who's in his second term as chairman of the Royal Scottish Pipe Band Association, and Jeff Mann, who is president of the Western US Pipe Band Association and also chairman of the Alliance of North American Pipe Band Associations.
The RSPBA, as well known as, has been in existence for 92 years. We started off in 1930, and it was basically a group of pipe majors were coming back from the Cowell Highland Gathering. They were coming back on the ferry, and they got very upset at the results because they thought everyone was corrupt. Now, we all know that all pipe majors think every adjudicator is corrupt unless they give them first place. But these guys decided to set up their own association, and from that spawned the Scottish Pipe Band Association. We didn't actually get the royal warrant, the royal, until 1980, which was our 50th anniversary. We just spent nearly £1 million refurbishing our headquarters to a fantastic standard with teaching rooms and, you know, performance areas and all the rest of it. that unfortunately we've never been able to use.
It's a lot larger than people realize. I know that.
As a result of COVID, I don't know if I'm going too far, we're expecting a massive influx of grading issues. And I think probably all the associations should be aware of this as well. You know, that it's 2 years since we've actively had competitions, so that the structure and the playing people within bands will change.
And Jeff Mann, maybe you could talk about ANAPA, how it came about and how it's organized today and what its structure is.
I sat there thinking about that, and I thought, well, why don't we just get all the pipe band associations together and find out what everybody does and find out what the rules and regulations are, so that, you know, if one of our bands wanted to go up to Canada or over to Scotland, or, you know, they, you know, everybody would know, be on the same page, so to speak. And they looked at me like I was crazy. I'd only been with the Pipe Band Association for a year. You know, I was a lowly registrar, membership registrar, and they looked at me and they said, you know, that will never work, you know. And so that only kind of made me a little more persistent and stubborn. So I thought, well, if they don't want to do it, I'll call them up myself and see, you know. So I called up each of the associations. I remember contacting Eastern, and Eastern was saying, well, I'm not sure we're really interested. And I said, well, I was just curious, Ontario. Oh, is Ontario going? Yeah, Ontario. Well, if Ontario's going to be there, we better be there too, you know. And so that's kind of how we got everybody started. The thought and the feeling was, you know, this is a good thing, and you know, it's good to communicate, so let's form an alliance. So that's kind of what we did.
And now ANAPA meets every 2 years in Kansas City, and all the associations, including the RSPBA, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, South America, everybody is represented now.
My mantra is, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And, you know, for me, that's kind of been my working, you know, if people know that you are truly invested in them, you know, people want to help. People want to be valued. You know, especially during COVID, I think that's really been telling for us, because we've done a major rework of our association in WSPA, Western United States Pipe Band Association. And with the inability to, you know, have band competition and that type of thing, you know, people are kind of saying, well, you know, what can we do? What can we do? Our music board was divided into 3 areas of grading, adjudication, and education. And our education component was weak. There wasn't much being done because all the focus was on adjudication and grading. Okay, let's organize a youth education council. So kids 19 and younger participate in a youth education council where they actually run the meetings. And it's just been amazing to see what these kids have done, you know. And now they are organizing their first online contest.
I wanted to ask you, Kevin, we haven't had a real contest now in over, well, will be over 2 years by the time we get back at it. Do you see any changes that might occur with future contests starting in 2022?
I think it's inevitable there's going to be changes, Jim. I do think that the world has changed. People's approach to piping has changed, to drumming has changed. It's sad, but I think, and this is a personal view, it's not an association view, that we may have lost a lot of people to pipe bands. I think we may have lost a lot of bands and I'm not sure that some of our smaller games will have survived it. Now, that's a personal view, but I certainly hope that does not happen. I mean, a little bit more figure-wise, in 2019, last time we had competitions, we ran 35 minor competitions, or games as you call them, and also 5 major championships. Now that relates to over 1,500 pipe band performances. Whether we get back to those figures or not, I don't know. I would like to hope so.
Well, one of the things that I've really appreciated about the Midwest Pipe Band Association is, and we're working on that right now, is how you folks get together with your game sponsors, your games organizers, on an annual basis, and improvements are made. You've got some synergy going on, and that collective synergy can really spawn some great ideas.
Yeah, we did that almost out of necessity. I don't know when it started, in the late 2000 aughts, maybe 07, 08, 09, something like that. And it was really a financial thing. It was in the downturn of our economy at the time, and a lot of games were struggling financially. And we found ways on both sides, their side and our side, of how we could put on a better event for less money. Kevin, what you guys put on, obviously the largest pipe band contest in history every year. You break your own record, I think, as well as 4 other major contests throughout the UK. Is there something that maybe you guys would like to see that from the organizers that you're not seeing?
Yeah, decent weather. Yeah, I think we've all got to talk to each other. I think that's important. And we've all got to learn from each other.
The Scottish school system now offers piping and drumming, and some of the bands, when I was at the Worlds in 2019, the novice juveniles and the juveniles from some of these schools are just incredible, the players they're producing through the school system. Mm-hmm. Is that something you could talk to us about, how that started and how it's progressing?
I think it sort of started, Jim, in the sense that traditional music in Scotland was seen to be lapsing. We can actually trace an upsurge back in Scotland to Red Hot Chili Peppers. And when the Red Hot Chili Peppers came online, lots of young people watched it and said, "Oh, I want to play the bagpipes like them."
And Jeff, you have a school near Los Angeles, Glendora High School. They've had a teaching program for a long time.
Right. So we've there's Helix High School down in San Diego, and then Glendora. The University of California, Riverside actually has a program where they are giving a bachelor's in music with emphasis in piping and drumming.
That's the future, and it's we do what we do, but we have to think of what goes on after we're all gone.
You're absolutely correct there, Jim. Without young people, we don't have a future.
That's a great note to maybe end on, is the youth and the future, and going forward out of this pandemic, that's where we all need to be. And certainly, I think we're looking forward to the future with smiles on our faces and hoping that it all comes off, and maybe later this year to start, and then 2022 full boat again.
Nancy Strolle is a board member and a past president of the Chicago Scots. She also heads up the Thistle and Heather Highland dancers, who visited this community every week during the pandemic. And they danced in our gardens and courtyards and outside resident rooms, putting smiles on faces and warmth in hearts and lifting spirits. Nancy's joined for a chat by 2 fellow teachers, Fred DeMarse, who heads up ScotDance USA, the governing body of Highland dance in the United States, and Christine Lacey. Christine's voice is probably the most important in the international community of Highland dancing. She's a 6-time world champion, and she's chair of the Royal Scottish Official Board of Highland Dancing. In 2014, She was awarded with an MBE for services to Highland dancing. And Christine began the chat by talking about her work to bring standardization to the world of Highland dancing.
My teacher, Jenny Stewart Haggerty, MBE, was one of the founding members of the board, and all the stories that she conveyed to me as a youngster was how all the different parts of Scotland had different variations of steps. You know, the north of Scotland had a way of doing the Highland Fling, different steps. The east of Scotland did it their variation. The west of Scotland had another variation. So it must have been quite fun in those days, trying to adapt whatever games you were going to, wherever they were being offered. There's a structure that is founded on the premise of the board that everything is as fair and equitable as we can possibly make it. So what do I mean by that? That the kids that are new to Highland dancing have a beginner card and they only compete against dancers of that same level. And then they progress right through from novice to intermediate to premier. So it's as fair and it's educated based on what our foundations are of our technique, our timing and our deportment.
Do you have a favorite games that you've attended that you look forward to still?
If I have to pick one, I'm going to pick one of our local games at Luss Highland Gathering, which is just, as we would say, up the road. It's about 8 miles along the Loch Lomond shore.
Certainly Costa Mesa, which is our Western Regional selection meet for the USIR, the US National Championships, that occurs in May. And when I competed, that was certainly an exciting day of the year for me, an exciting weekend. All of the best dancers in our region showed up. I love to compete and I love to compete against them.
What are we doing or what can we do to ensure that our heritage and traditions remain relevant as we pass them along to future generations?
This is a continuing effort to maintain, to educate and communicate training of the dancers, then the training of the teachers, the training of the judges, the organizing of the competitions. We're continuing this tradition and we're trying to engage, we continue to try to engage more people in our community, bring in younger dancers and encourage and engage our young teachers, our new teachers, so that they will bring in new dancers. We are revitalizing our alumni association again to bring in those faithful volunteers.
As we're just getting ready and we're just seeing in the US, and I think it's happening in other places in the world, Christine, maybe you can expand on that. What a return to dance competitions is going to look like in the near future, and what a return to dance competitions at a Highland Games or the Highland Games in general may look like in the future, post-COVID.
It's very topical just now, but just to give you an understanding of throughout the world, New Zealand are back to competing, as are Australia, as are obviously United States are about to be launched in there, which is all fabulous news. In Scotland, we have our first pilot event. The pilots will be our learning, and then in turn we'll be able to educate all event organisers. We're keeping going, and we'll work through what we need to work through to get the dancers who are crying out to get back to some form of normality. As far as the board's concerned, we have what we call a domestic steering group working to deliver an online presentation right now that will hopefully generate some spark into taking up Highland dancing over the summer. Everything's happening in the background, so if there's any dancers listening, please know throughout the world, if you're not up and running at competitions, we were doing everything in the planning side of it to facilitate that happening so that ultimately everybody in our community is safe.
Do you see any movement towards Highland Games being scheduled for the rest of 2021 that are going forward? Is there talk of that in your areas?
From the Scotland's perspective, I can answer, there is nothing that I know of. It's just not viable right now.
In the United States, I am aware that there are some Highland Games that are opting to, they are planning to occur this year. I say that with knowing the weight of responsibility that ScotDance USA has. We've spent the last year since the beginning of the pandemic working toward guidelines. Once we were at a point where we could restart, we need to mitigate the risk involved and promote the safety of all members of our dance community, all members of the public who attend our events. Running a competition in 2021 will not be for the faint of heart.
Because we are a very traditional art form, how do we make the tradition and the heritage and the things that we all love dear, how do we bring that to the next generation? How do we instill in them when everything is just very, very temporary and throwaway and what have you? How do we make them grasp onto the values and the traditions and the Scottishness of what we do and the rich history of it? How do we get the next generation to buy into what we're selling, I guess?
People will choose what they want to embrace and love and engage in. We have a professional development group working to engage young teachers, mentoring young teachers to hone their skills and to get dancers in their studios going. That we're going to make it. We'll have to build again, but we'll get back to a very strong organization.
17th of May was the first time our 18 and overs have been allowed to come to class since last September, October time. We've only been able to, on the limited times that we were able to offer classes from April, from before Christmas, it was all just the youth with all the restrictive practices, etc., that were required within your local authority guidelines. But my 18-year-olds and over came in on Monday night, and I've never heard such excitement. They were back, seeing one another and doing what they love to do.
What do you see as being a benefit that will, or being on this hiatus, if you can call it a benefit, that will lead us forward?
Through adversity, we become stronger. And this past year, when we've been physically isolated, we've taken a step back and worked on details, or we've worked on other things that we didn't seem to ever have time to work on because we were pushing for that next competition or performance, or something was happening. We've had the time to step back and gather our thoughts and work on things that needed to be worked on.
So let's imagine in 2022 that we're looking at COVID in the rearview mirror, and we are able to return to games. Do you see the general public being excited and willing to embrace that?
We will get past these pandemic conditions. It's going to take a while, and the cooperation of all of us in the world. Once
we get to that stage, it's in the rearview mirror, it will be all systems go. And anybody that was in it was their passion, it was their love, and that before COVID, it's even more.
Yep. It's more intense now.
That spark is going to be reignited instantaneously, and the flame will be larger. I firmly believe that.
There are few things that are as instantly recognisable as being Scottish as a big burly guy in a kilt hurling a caber through the air. Well, for the purposes of today's chat about athletics, there is not a big burly guy in a kilt in sight. Instead, we'll hear from 4 mighty women. These women are taking the sport forward to new and better places. Between them, they have broken many, many world records. They are world, North American and national champions. They hold athletic directorships, and they've thrown all over the world. Collectively, they work with passion and purpose on behalf of women athletes to bring equity with their male counterparts. Chicago native Elissa van Vleck is joined by Katie Crowley, Karyn Dallimore and Terri Ventress.
Our first discussion question is kind of share what the Highland Games was like when you guys first got involved.
When I first started, I would travel with my now husband and a couple of friends who we all threw together. I was the only female. And we would travel with female implements. And so the women have a little bit different weights than the men, as you all know. And so when I would show up to games, I would say, hey, can I compete? And they would say, sure, but I don't have X, Y, or Z. And I say, it's okay, I got it in the truck, or I got it in the back of the car. And then they would say, absolutely. But it very much wasn't geared, that it was not female centric by any means. It was a little bit of a novelty to have women throw. And to be perfectly honest, a little bit of an overthought. And that is me saying that with people that I know and love now, being in the competing for almost 2 decades, a decade and a half now, and seeing where it's come. And those same athletic directors are now just gangbusters promoting the heck out of women. So it has come really so far from even the last 14, 15 years that I've been competing. And so I'm really interested to see what some of the other ladies, who I think both Karyn and Terri have been in it for much longer. And so I'm very, very interested in kind of hearing their take on that, because in the last decade and a half, it has come, it warms my heart to see how far it has come.
When I first started throwing, it was 97. So I've got 24 years or 25 seasons. There were 2 women actually throwing at the first games I ever attended. And they have become a couple of my best friends. Unfortunately, they're no longer throwing, but because they had been throwing for maybe a year, there were at least athletic directors in the Oklahoma City and the Tulsa games that were supporting women. I think the last big games I really threw in was Estes, and we had over 40 women on the field. Wow. So hugely different. That was so much fun, by the way. I've kind of enjoyed seeing like the Scottish side of things too, because I mean, Karyn can talk about this as well. They really don't typically have women throwing heavy events, but yet the women that have gone over to throw have really been met with, I think, open arms and very welcome. There have been enough struggles with certain games and or athletic directors, but I mean, again, those are just challenges, opportunities, as I like to call them. And I think the growth has been so very rewarding that it makes everything else worth it.
When I first started, I, after my car accident, I figured when I couldn't walk, when I could walk again, that my test would be to see if I could toss a caber. Don't ask me why. To East Coast thing, I mean, I'm like, oh, if I'm better, that will be the litmus test. But anyway, so I just looked up where the local games was the BC Highland Games. And of course I had long nails and my lips are pretty much how I am now. But, so I show up and there's no other female throwers, of course, just me and the guys are just look from one end. I'm like, okay, so, and of course, no female equipment. So I threw all the men's stuff. And they pretty much, I remember Joel Thiessen going, hey, weight over bar, throw us over your head and move so you don't die. And like, that was my instructions on how to, do weight over bar, throw it this way, try, always with the ending, try not to die at the end. But, what's interesting is those games now, I'm the athletic director. I've been the athletic director for those games now for 10 years. So it's kind of full circle. I was the only female throwing. There had been females in the past, like here and there, like 1 or 2 or whatever, maybe some that came up from the States, but slowly as I got involved in it, I of course I always wanted to get more women involved, because a lot of times we would go to the games, Terri, you could attest to this, or anybody throwing, sometimes people come up, oh, I didn't know women did it, and they would just see you throw, or like, they're like, also too, I'm not an Olympic athlete, I don't have a background in throwing, and so like, oh, if I can do it, you can do it, so just seeing a female, regardless of how you're throwing, how good, far, just see a female on the throw could inspire someone else to throw. And we used to run a women's only training clinic weekend. That's when we started the Sisterhood of the Traveling Kilt, almost as a joke, that we started, we would travel around, we had the kilt, I had the kilt made, and then every games it would go to where there'd be females, we'd put a pin on it. It brought media attention to females in the sport. It was a fun thing to do, but it traveled around the world.
I feel like I'm the only one that has joined latest of this group. So this is my starting my 7th season. And so I feel like you guys have paved the way. So for people like me that nowadays join, there are groups that fit everybody. There's, the over 40 groups are established in most games. It was when I was there. And then the under 40 women compete together, and that has an established group when you're there. And even the women's lightweight, which is 150 pounds or less in most places, that group was just sort of beginning, but it was still around. And so when I joined the games, everybody has a spot, and which is really cool. And something that I loved about when I joined the games was I walked in and I was atypical for most athletes, right? There's a body type that fits a runner, and this body type that fits a sprinter. And I came in and I was like, well, I like to lift weights sometimes. And so what I love about it was when I walked on the field, it's a non-judgmental place where, hey, you want to spend 6-7 hours in the sun? Well, come on over here and you guys can throw with us. And so it's a really great place where it's not like you have to be Scottish. And I didn't feel like that when I walked on the field. And it's not a place where you have to know everything when you walk on there. I also did not feel like that when I walked in. I was like, hey, this is going to be fun. And all of these people that you see surrounding yourselves, yes, they're all strangers, but they're all going to help you. The work that you guys have all spoken to, it's very cool how down the road, then you can see how it becomes an open and a nurturing place for literally anybody that walks on the field that has an athletic background, or who just likes to be active, or just wants to tap into their heritage, whatever it is that's part of that is now seen as a very visible thing, even for people that aren't even competing. I've had people that come to the games and it's like, that's a cool community. And that's really speaks a lot to the people that started the games this side of the ocean. And then that speaks a lot to the participants that have taken that culture and said, this is my culture now, and I'm going to share this with literally anybody who walks in this field.
This is something that we intentionally put time and money and effort and blood, sweat, and tears too into going to multiple times throughout the year and seeing friends competing with and against each other and loving every minute of it.
If there was a female who wanted to come out and get started, advice for women or girl, if they're younger than, that 16, 18, whatever it is. And so what piece of advice would you give someone who is interested in the Highland Games sport? What do you tell them?
Don't worry about what other people think. You don't have to be in what your mind you might think you have to be super strong. Just come out and try it.
Go be you and go have fun.
Come out, be comfortable in your own skin. Get me out in the field with a bunch of friends in the sun and talk smack to each other and give each other a hard time and have a lot of fun doing it and still have a little bit of drive. That's a beautiful thing. So don't be afraid, just get out there and start doing it, and you will find your little group, you will.
So when I think of Scottish identity or Scottish culture, it's an all-in kind of a thing, and everyone's allowed to be in, and you have a place to be in it, whether you want to be the organizer, if you want to be supporter, if you want to be the athlete or the dancer or the piper. There's just so many different ways that you can be involved that just makes you happy.
Thank you for being part of today's look at the future of Highland Games. And thank you for your support over the last year and a half. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been in the business of protecting physical health, of protecting lives, and we have an impeccable record of safety and success. But now that we have one of the highest vaccination rates in the field of senior care, we're also in the business of reconnecting families and reconnecting our Chicago Scots community. Please accept my invitation to join this amazing group of people by going to chicagoscots.org, where you can sign up to become a member of this incredible community. It's free, and you'll become part of a tradition and a community that's 175 years in the making. On behalf of the incredible people who live and work at Caledonia Senior Living and all Chicago Scots, I raise this parting glass And I wish you now and in the times ahead good health. Be well. Cheers. And now, without further ado, I'm proud and delighted to enthusiastically announce that the Chicago Scots Scottish Festival and Highland Games will be returning in person on the third weekend of June 2022, come rain or come shine. In fact, now that I think about it, today's weather is a little too good for a Highland Games. That's better. See you next year.